All right, welcome to another edition of the DJ Doran Show. I am so excited to have a friend of mine, Wesley Friedman. We're going to talk about UFOs today, a topic that fascinates me, and I'm sure it fascinates a lot of people. And it just seems that this show is so apropos to what's happening in the world right now. And so Wes Friedman, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for having me. Well, I just turned 45. Big number. Born and raised in Chicago. I have been in the restaurant business since 1998. I went to the University of Kansas and graduated, and all of a sudden started waiting tables. And then I got stuck. A lot of people kind of forget what they want to be. And I just said, I'm going to make some money. And then fast forward, it's 2020 and I'm still doing it. And I love it. I run Hannah's Pretzel in the city. We have 7 locations around the loop. Amazing sandwiches, pretzel bread, and I love it. I love food.
I love soft pretzels. Are you kidding me? How come I'm your friend and I haven't seen any of this stuff?
I'm pretty secretive when it comes to work, actually. I'm so busy. What happens is the more I talk about it, the more people want food. And then I end up feeling like I have to feed everybody, and there's just no time for that. But because I'm on your show, and
I got you. You can surprise me.
That means a lot. So I'm going to hook you up. Sandwiches.
That's awesome. Okay, so anyway, Wes, so there's a couple of things I want to talk about. So first of all, you sent me a couple of links, and I did watch them, and I was familiar with Dr. Greer prior to seeing those links. Now, one thing that kind of turned me off a little bit about the Dr. Greer interview is that kid Maddie.
Yeah. And
I was like, okay, you're a doofus, and so why would someone who has such a good reputation, he was gonna arrange a raid on Area 51 as a former military pilot. The only thing that he would have accomplished is getting his ass shot or arrested or both. And then he like you put it, he just sort of lucked out and fell into this thing. So tell me what you think about that.
Well, Maddie, there's a little bit of a backstory, which I'll go into in just a minute. I don't know Maddie personally, but I've spoken to him several times. And I think what Dr. Greer is doing is using Maddie and his popularity, I suppose, and his Facebook thing with millions of kids. He wants young people to get into this. And that's the only reason. He wasn't going to Maddie because he's an expert. He's a nice kid. He's a kid. So I think Dr. Greer was really using him to reach younger kids who might not be interested, who follow Maddie. That's why.
That makes a little bit more sense, because when I was listening to the interview, I was like, wow, he is clearly intelligent, educated, and knowledgeable about the subject. And Maddie came across as a stoner who was putting together this Storm Area 51 event, and it got out of control.
That is correct. He's just a guy. And so when he did that, it basically got bigger than him. And how I ended up hooking up with him was I have some big ideas sometimes. And I sort of reached out and said, look, right at the beginning, I said, I have this idea to make some money, because everyone was trying to get money from him. And he was really nice, and he answered me. And I made friends with him. I made friends with Connie West, who runs the Little Alien in Rachel, Nevada.
Yeah. That's one of the places I've always wanted to visit.
Yeah, me too. And I was supposed to go, and here we are. But anyway, those two hooked up, and they were supposed to make this big party in the desert. And then things tumbled. It's a very long story, but if you really look into it, he just has no clue. Someone threw a lot of money at him, and then he made a lot of money off of it and just sort of said, I'll do anything now. And now all he does now is make money. Does interviews, makes money. And he's just so lucky, but he's just a kid. I feel kind of bad for him sometimes.
Well, this is the thing that I want to talk about. And before we get into some of this other stuff, I'm not a crazy, right? I'm not a crazy. I was a professional pilot in the Air Force, as you know.
Yeah.
And I've seen some crazy shit flying over remote parts of the world. And, you look at the co-pilot and you say, I'm not going to report that because it'll, could have a negative implication on your career. And I can tell you there is a lot more of that than you would imagine.
I believe it.
Where pilots see that sort of stuff. The other thing is I had a friend who worked at Area 51, and he never spoke about it, didn't do anything. But what I found fascinating is he said, they're hiding in plain sight, right? And so like he would fly to Las Vegas, and then he would fly this white airplane with a red stripe on it out to Area 51, and right in the middle of everything, right in the middle of McCarran Airport and everything, and people knew about it, but they just didn't. I don't know if they didn't care or what have you. But he said a lot of what people suspect go on out there doesn't go on out there. Like it is literally a testing facility for new technologies. But he was saying, and I remember him specifically saying, I was in my early 30s back then. I'm 59 now. And he said to me, I can't really tell you everything, but there is a section of Area 51 that not even I'm allowed to go to.
Wow.
And so I said, well, what's over there? And I was laughing. I said, oh, that's where they keep the UFOs and the aliens. And I'll never, ever forget it because his reaction was absolutely telling. There was no reaction. He just stared. And I thought to myself, see, I'm getting goosebumps because I'm remembering that conversation, because I remember thinking to myself, wow, whatever he is not supposed to talk about, they have him scared enough that he isn't talking about it.
Yeah.
And so I always suspected that there was more going on there than not. And then over the course of the years as a pilot, in seeing some of the things, you're like, wait a minute, that defies aerodynamic principles and physics. What aircraft or what light can go at 90-degree angles or go from zero to whatever? Never said anything. I'll fast forward 25 years, 30 years, and all of a sudden, there's just nonstop UFO information coming out. Do you know who Bob Lazar is?
I do.
So I read about him, and I watched a documentary on him. What do you think about him? What do you think about what they did or what they supposedly did to him?
Bob is 100% telling the truth, in my opinion. I'm like I said, I'm 45, so since I was 12 or 13, I've been studying anything I can get my hands on. And because you're saying there's more and more that's been coming out, the thing is, it's always been there. But now we have the internet and Facebook and Instagram and camera phones. Okay, it's always been there, just now it's more accessible. So Bob, he doesn't want to do anything but just tell his story. He didn't get into it to make money. He actually isn't really interested in UFOs. He's interested in the tech, the engineering part behind it. And from what I've seen from him, I believe every second, his story never has changed. He says it the same way every time. It's almost tiring. Again, I feel bad for people like that who he didn't come out and say, look at me. He just said, I have this amazing story. He assumed it would mean something to everybody. And the fact is, that's not how the UFO thing works. It means a lot to a little bit of people, and everyone else calls you crazy. And it's just kind of not fair. He's a smart guy.
Right, because if you read his bio, I was reviewing it before we got on the show, and he's supposedly gone to MIT, right? And he was supposedly worked at Area 51. He had all this knowledge of reverse engineering and all of that. And if you read his Wikipedia, they have portrayed him as a sexual deviant because of that thing. They've erased his involvement at Area 51 and at California Institute of Technology, MIT, and all of that. And the one thing that sort of piques my interest is that somebody found a little name tag or a phone book or something that had his name in there, excuse me, with other scientists at Area 51. And why would that be there if he wasn't there, even if he was a contractor? Right? Now, but in all fairness, he did have some detractors. Do you know who Stanton Friedman is?
I do. I've actually spoke to Stan. Well, he passed away, but my last name is Friedman. I've actually spoken to Stan a couple times, and he wasn't a big fan. Which
he wasn't a
thought was
big
interesting.
fan, but he was a true scientist, you know, and he wanted to really focus on a very specialized analysis of alien visitation. I think when I watched one of his interviews, I think one of the things that he had a problem with was with the controversy that followed Bob Lazar. He thought was unnecessary, and especially like the arrest and all of that sort of things. And he didn't know. He even said, he goes, I don't know what's true or what's not true, but it certainly doesn't bring a positive light to ufology or ufologists, you know, that are legitimate, right? Mm-hmm. But I want to talk about something that, and then I want to hear your version of this, and then we'll get into the rest of this. And that is, when I was in the Air Force, one of the things that I read for Project Blue Book, and I think it was called Majestic or something. There was something. They had a well thought out strategy on how to deal with people that claim they were abducted or have seen UFOs, and the core of that was to portray them as not left wing, loonies and crazies and fringe people and what have you, because buried in that narrative were the real people who actually had some sort of firsthand knowledge, right? So that was the strategy that the Air Force employed is, okay, we can't pick and choose, so we're just going to make everybody. We're going to make so that if you believe in UFOs, you're automatically categorized as crazy.
Yeah, it's
now,
pretty
what do you
sad.
think about that? Do you think there's some truth to that?
Well, it's a no-win situation. So what they said was, we can't stop people from seeing things. We can't stop people from reporting things. But what they can do is exactly what you said. They can make them look like that's absolutely the worst thing ever. It's silly. You're crazy. And they just do it over and over and over. So over 20, 30, 40 years, that's it. It's in movies. It's on TV. Just 2 weeks ago, when the Navy, the 3 videos came out, they literally said, these are UFOs. They're not ours. We know what they are. No one cares. Nobody. That should be front page news. It should be the whole world saying, oh my gosh, there's aliens. Nobody cares. And the reason is because of years and years of abuse by people just, pointing a finger and saying, that guy's crazy, so don't listen to him. That's it. End of story.
That's it. And, and these are the things too. One of the things that Stanton Friedman said is he focused on legitimate professional people making claims that were credible, not these fringe loonies that said, oh, I was abducted or I was this or that, and without any credibility. These were pilots, scientists, astronomers. Sorry, I was trying to get rid of my New York accent and I got tongue tied. I was going to say astronomer, without the R. It's the astronomers, but and all of these credible people. And I, my thought is that, first of all, kudos to the government. If they really have kept a lid on this since let's say after World War II or maybe even before, then that's the first time the government ever has been able to keep a secret, for any length of time. And then secondly, I did have a discussion years ago. We're talking about UFOs, and I said, why don't they just let people know that they're out there? And one of the things that the guy said to me, he says, well, the minute people realize that the government can't protect them from something, there'll be anarchy. And that was their motivation. Now, I'll tell you a little crazy theory that I have. My theory is that all this science fiction, all Star Trek, Star Wars, and all the rest of this is just part of a plan to get us comfortable with the idea of extraterrestrial life and interstellar travel and all that. And I think that when it happens, we're going to be like, oh, I saw that on The Mandalorian. That's nothing, or what have you. And that's my own thought. I don't know if it'll hold water, but I always thought to myself, mainly Star Trek. Star Trek to me was sort of like that credible, scientific-based space odyssey where, okay, we're exploring strange new worlds and we might find strange new things once we get out of our solar system. I don't think it's going to be shocking for a lot of people, and that could answer what you said earlier about the UFOs that the Navy just brought. They're like, okay, I've seen that. that on all these other shows. It's no big deal. I think a first contact scenario would be a global event, and I think it happened already, quite frankly. But who knows? Who knows? Look what just happened in Brazil just the other day.
Yeah, the Brazil thing is interesting for those listening or watching. It appears a UFO crashed, and I think it's called Mage, I can't pronounce it. Brazil by Rio de Janeiro, and the first 2 days there were videos, pictures, helicopters in the air. There was a lot of action, and then third day you can't find it anywhere. It's gone. It's all been deleted. So it's a little weird. If something didn't happen, you would assume they wouldn't make a big deal. You could just go watch those videos, and they would just let it go. But I think because something did happen,
here's the thing:
you can't find it anywhere.
I think the other thing is, you're right. There were a lot of things on social media, and then it's been suddenly scrubbed. But then Google Images conveniently had a glitch in a suspicious shape over Rio, and the Google spokesman explained that the glitch is a common phenomenon called blooming that occurs when a reflection overloads a satellite sensor, and I think that just adds fuel to that fire, And I'm looking at the image, and it's in the shape of a UFO. I mean, it doesn't look like there's any peripheral damage, so who knows? But I think you add all of that together, it just perpetuates that whole conspiracy theory. I don't know what the big deal is. If a UFO crashes, why just get it out and move on, right?
You would think it would be, you think it would be something that they'd be interested in doing, but obviously that's just not going to happen. So nope. I try not to get upset about it.
But I do think, I used to be of the mindset that there was going to be some sort of revelation in my lifetime, and now that I'm getting older, I'm thinking, I wonder if that's going to happen. But I do think it's coming, because I just don't think they can keep this under wraps. Whether you're a believer or not, whether you're a crazy or you are more focused on empirical evidence. One thing, Stanley Friedman, I got to find it. I'm going to look for it right now. And he said something that was interesting. He was the first guy to document the Roswell incident.
Yeah.
And but there's something that I thought was really interesting. He said, there's no substantive grounds for dismissing the authenticity of these claims of alien visitation. And he debated the guy, the senior astronomer from SETI, and although he believes in the existence of intelligent life, he doesn't believe that life from other worlds are on Earth or is even related to UFO sightings. But I think the thing that I'm trying to find here, it was only seeing. I mean, the promise of relevant specifically versus 1 second here. It shows that the better quality, the more likely it was. One of the things that I want to point out that he said is a lot of people, and me included, we're not familiar that the fact that there have been large-scale scientific-based studies on UFOs and the existence of UFOs. It's not just, hey, I saw a UFO last night. These are well-known scientists and institutions that have undertaken these large-scale studies, and he said that he gave all these speeches, he would say that 1 or 2% of his audience would be the only number of people that have heard of these studies out of hundreds of people. And I think that his comment that majority of people believe UFOs exist, and some group of scientists as well, and he quoted a whole bunch of polls. But my thought is that for Friedman, that's where his focus was. Is like, okay, I don't want to get involved in all this other craziness, but let's talk about the science. Let's talk about the facts. Let's talk about the studies. And there's plenty out there to be to be understood. Whereas Bob Lazar was sort of very controversial and discredited, and then of course things happened, whether it was self-inflicted or manipulated by another source, that sort of really undermined his credibility. And so Dr. Friedman wanted to stay away from that, and for the most part, he did, which I thought was really fascinating. Now,
go on.
What do you think about that? What do you think about the fact that there's so much information out there, but by and large, most people are unaware of it?
So this is a very deep conversation because it touches a lot of things. Most of all, I think the average person is just worried about going to work, going home, having fun, whatever their life is, right? When you are like me, I walk outside and the first thing I do is I look up. I look at the sky, night, day, doesn't matter. I think bigger. I don't have these inside thoughts that really matter to me. I want to know these other things. Now, that compared with religion, compared with not feeling that you can do anything about it. So people say, all right, so I have this information. What now? And that's America, really. It's you can go study, go do the homework. And that's like probably number one for me. If you go put the work in and you read all the studies, you do what Stanton did, you pay attention to the facts, it's kind of hard to say that it's not happening. But it's easier just to say, you're crazy, whatever, and then they move on.
Well, one thing you just said I want to elaborate on. This is what I think happens. I think that for the most part, people just go about their business, and as long as nothing is interrupted, it's just a thing that's happening over there, right?
Correct.
I also think that most people believe that it is scientifically impossible to believe that in our galaxy, which makes up millions or billions of other galaxies, we're the only planet that evolved some sort of sentient, intelligent life, right?
Yes.
Now, the other thing, too, is most people don't realize this, is that when you see the light of a star, like from let's just say the Andromeda system or wherever, right? You're not seeing the light that just happened today. You're seeing the light, they could be looking at, if they looked at a telescope and looked at the Earth, they would see dinosaurs because light travels at 186,000 miles per second. By the time that got here, we're living in the modern world, but they're seeing the Triassic world, right?
Yep.
So that's other things in reverse too. So my whole thought about extraterrestrials are, I believe they're there. I don't know if they're here, but here's the thing. If you don't do any research about it, it's easy to fluff it off as like, that's just science fiction or that's just whatever. But because I was doing research for this specifically, and as I started to dig and watch the videos of Stephen Greer and Bob Lazar and Stanton Friedman and all of these learned people, these are educated people. These are not crackpots. They're not drunks, drug addicts, or, social media influencers or micro-influence. These are well-respected scientists in their field, continuing to be well-respected scientists in their fields. And as I was digging through, I'm like, oh my God, there is more and more and more. And then I started to think about my conversation with my friend where he said, the strategy is hide in plain sight. Now I started to look. Now I look more, and you notice things. You notice in the news. You notice on the web. You notice little things. I was reading an article about what the heck's his name? Travis Walton.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So Travis Walton, they did a movie which he said was okay, but it wasn't completely accurate, called Fire in the Sky. Right? So I watched that movie, and I thought to myself, why, first of all, would a group of rednecks bring this kind of scrutiny upon themselves? Right? What's the upside of it? And then you start reading and listening to some of the speeches that he made, and you realize, how does he know this? And why would he know this? Right?
Yeah.
And And that's a pretty big hoax to undertake and maintain for 20 plus years, right?
More. Yeah.
So then, more. And then you think about that. And then you think of, what was the name of the guy, the woman that got abducted? Her husband was African-American.
Betty and Barney Hill.
Yeah, Betty and Barney Hill. What would motivate them to go through what they went through? And I started to read about that, and it sent chills up my spine. And then someone, countered that, and they said, well, this is just our government. And they used the argument that we had the SR-71 for, up teen years before we even knew about it, which is true. It's true. And I knew that because that happened during my time in the Air Force. We had the SR-71 Blackbird, which was crazy technology, 20 years before the public knew that we even had it.
Sure.
Right? Sure. So what if we're seeing advanced technology that we would rightfully construe as extraterrestrial when really it is just advanced technology? What do you think about that? Is that a valid argument? Is that
for some things, yeah. Unfortunately, when you think about how we got there, let's say they're all human beings are flying these things. We went from, it's 2020. We went from, I unfortunately forgot the exact year that we first started driving cars,
1908, I think.
Yeah, okay, so a long time ago, right?
Something. Yes.
It's been this much in human history. So we went from just starting to drive a car to right now where we went to the moon, and okay, it's 2020. For something to go from that to, defying gravity and doing 90 degree turns and zipping from here to here in a millisecond, that doesn't work, right? We didn't just magically do that without someone's help. And that's why this is all so unbelievable, because now, and especially according to Dr. Greer or Bob Lazar, like there are some human man-made things that if you see screws or rivets or seams, it looks like a machine we built. There's those that move and do crazy things. And there's the other things that are absolutely not human. And I believe that we have gotten that technology. We worked with whatever you want to call them, beings that are not human. And we came up with the way to defy gravity using machines. And it's such a long, deep conversation that I'm not smart enough for, but I've watched and talked to so many people about it. And I 100% believe that. But it doesn't make any sense. You can't just say, oh, well, those are probably ours, because humans would die. Humans wouldn't live through that kind of stuff. So,
well, I'm going to add to that. There's something that I want to share, and that is, what do people say? Like, for instance, what happened to the Inca and the Maya and the Egyptians, right? So when I've been to Egypt several times, and when one of the times that I was at Giza, I walked over to the pyramids and I put my hand on the pyramids, and it is life altering when you touch something like that, and immediately my mind was transported back to the pharaohs and all of that, right? It happened. It was real. Mm-hmm. That is not just in the history books. That happened. But what fascinated me is I wanted to do the credit card test. You know what I'm talking about?
I do.
I took my wallet out. I took out a credit card and I tried to put it in between the joints of these huge blocks. And they were still so tightly fit that it would hardly get in there. Of course, accounting for erosion and broken areas, whatever. But for the most part, it would not go in there. And I'm thinking to myself, how does a civilization build this? How do they build these temples? And how did we have that technology thousands of years ago, right? Same thing with the Maya. How did they build those pyramids thousands of years ago? And my thought goes back, the more you dig, right? So now you look at some of the stone carvings or the tablets, and you see these things that are clearly alien, like UFOs, or they're clearly spacesuits or what have you. Why would they even be thinking about that? What would they have to? Both of those cultures were visual cultures, so they are writing or creating what they are seeing, right? So that's one thing. And then the second thing is that the comment you made is that, from the beginning of, I'll use aviation because I was a pilot. So in 1908 was when the Wright brothers flew the airplane to 2020, right? Think about that. That's 120 years, 110, what was it, 1908? 110 years, 130 years, almost 130 years. 130 years, that's little over one lifetime. We went from flying a balsa and fabric aircraft to having Virgin Galactic.
Yeah.
Right?
Now think about it. Think about a civilization that has been doing it for 500 years or 1,000 or a million.
But then you go back, if you look at it even from if you really want your head to explode, you say, okay, from the beginning of when man started using tools to the Bronze Age, to the Industrial Revolution, and what have you. So we took these big steps in big chunks of time, then big chunks of time, and then big chunks of time. And then from 1908, we took a little chunk of time and have gone from, driving cars with a handle to having the space shuttle.
Yeah.
And beyond. So either we got really smart really fast, or we had some help, whether directly or indirectly, and did some reverse engineering, as Bob Lazar was saying, which is what his curiosity was. And then I think to myself, okay, so we're creating all this. We're now at this point where I can talk to you looking at my screen, right? I can talk to anyone in the world, anywhere in the world. I can do the same thing instantly, as long as you have an internet connection. Now we have so many satellites, you can have internet anywhere. I can do all of those different things, and at some point, they will not be. It's easy to contain a secret like this when the method of technology prevents mass consumption of news or information. But if you just watch how we're growing in the media phase of things and see how we're sharing news, I mean, we're in a war in Iraq, and I'm sitting at my desk watching a play-by-play of drone strikes and the assassination of Osama bin Laden, right? Well, I'm watching it in the comfort of my own home as it's happening, right? So how long are they going to be able to keep this under wraps? Somebody, somewhere, at some time, is going to have credible evidence. Now, here's the thing, too, that I never really understood this, and maybe this is going to change. Why do people that film videos always film them? They're shaking up and down, and it's blurry, and doesn't anyone have a decent fucking camera or a video, and they can get real up close video of it? And I think that's happening. I think that's going to happen. I think one day someone with an iPhone 11 Pro Max like I have is going to take a video, focus in, and it's going to be real. They're going to be able to show proportion because there'll be trees or buildings next or whatever. And what is that moment like?
Well, if you do your homework and you study long enough, the problem comes where nowadays you don't know what's real and what's not real. I've personally seen over the last 15 years, maybe 20 to 30 videos that they're just real, that there's something in the sky. It could be daytime, nighttime. They're not ours. There's no way. But then you have the disinformation, and that's why nothing happens, because they flood the internet with CGI and just garbage. So now you can't tell the difference. And so the Facebook groups that I'm in, or the friends that I know, when I trust somebody and they say, hey, look at this, I know who it's coming from. I know what I'm looking at. And if they say that thing's real, I give it about an 80% chance. But if it's a random video on the internet, you just don't know. And it's so much, people stop caring. And that's where Hollywood came in. That's where TV came in. It's just normal. So when you see something, you're like, UFO, whatever, and you move on. That's it. So apart from it crashing into the Willis Tower in the middle of the city, and there's whatever aliens running around, nothing's gonna happen. Nothing. And they've done a good job making it so.
I think that's the thing. They've done a really good job of making us desensitized to any of the news. The one caveat that I think to that is the military. The military has credibility. So when you have military pilots scratching their heads and communicating on radios and the military releasing that, I almost think that they're testing the water to see what the reaction is. Because, you know, these military sighting cameras that they have on fighters and whatever, they can track something at 600 miles an hour or even greater, like they did on that one. So how do you dispute that? You know, if a military pilot says, hey, we're tracking something that is going at this excessive speed and what have you, but it's not an airplane, then all of a sudden it makes a 90-degree turn, which defies physics. And you have a military pilot who's trained to identify other aircraft and track other aircraft for defense. That's pretty credible. To me, that was the most thing ever. Because I think once the dam cracks and the military starts saying, okay, well, we're going to start disclosing these sightings that these pilots see, then I think then people will start to take notice. And that's why I say I've noticed over the last few months especially a lot more sightings, credible sightings being released and being covered by news media, but not in the broad scale of wow, this is an earth-shattering or a civilization level event, more of like as an afterthought. And I think that they're sort of saying, well, let's throw this out there and see who runs with it, who picks it up, how the population reacts, because I think the overarching concern of any government is their ability or inability to protect its population. And if that is stripped away, then, you know, where's their authority? Where's their ability to defend its population? And people will start thinking for themselves and start thinking about, how do I defend myself? My government can't defend me. How do I defend me? If aliens land, what's going to happen? Listen, this whole pandemic thing has taught me a couple of things. One is the group mob mentality about okay, if one person starts hoarding toilet paper, it's only a matter of time before people say, well, if they're hoarding toilet paper, there must be something there, so I should hoard toilet paper, and then it exponentially just grows and grows and grows. Do you know that since the beginning of this COVID-19 thing, I have not bought any toilet paper, and we're fine.
That's amazing.
You know, but in the beginning, I saw people running with toilet paper. Who would have thought that toilet paper was the new gold? You know?
Yeah, people are just, they don't know any better, right? So like you said, one person does it. Oh my God.
Well, I think that's the argument. Same thing with UFOs. I think that if people react calmly and the government reacts calmly, almost passé, that people will not really do anything. But the minute the government says, okay, we need to be concerned, watch what happens. Mm-hmm. It'll be like a brush fire in a drought. And people will go crazy, and they'll start hoarding food and weapons and things and that takes on a critical mass of its own and scales up to anarchy, in my view. And what this whole thing taught me is that even in COVID-19, this is sort of like you're watching a living, working test of what a global crisis can do to a population.
It's interesting timing, isn't it? When most, I would say 90% of people are at home watching TV. So guess what? It is a good time to test people. Throw the UFO videos on. Everyone's watching. Nothing happened. The average person doesn't care.
No, you know why, Wes? I believe is because I've seen it on The Mandalorian. I've seen it on Star Wars that I've watched 50 times. I've seen it on Star Trek, so it's not a big deal. And even the military video is blurry, you know, because it's not designed to be a movie camera. It's designed to be a sighting camera, so they're not looking for detail. I think the minute they get a legitimate UFO in clear video, that is when you're going to see the reaction. But until then, it's just something we can't explain. It's probably, you know, our black ops government creating some new technology that we're unaware of. But I think that the more credible people that come out, like Stanton Friedman when he was alive, Bob Lazar and others, Dr. Greer, that come out and just talk about the science of it, talk about the studies about it, talk about the credibility of people that have seen UFOs or people that have claimed to have been abducted, and start building on that credibility. I think as long as we continue to do that, I think that people will feel safer. I don't know.
Yeah, this should be the biggest story that's ever happened.
It should be the biggest story.
It's just not.
It should be the biggest story ever in the history of mankind, and it's not. Instead, we're more worried about the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And that's where and influencers that that go out and pose for their photos. But I think that I think it's close. I think that it's going to happen. Now I want to shift focus, and I want to talk to you about the Rendlesham Forest incident.
Great.
Right. So I knew about that one. I was in the Air Force at the time for 2 years, and I had heard about it because Rendlesham was a military base operated by the Air Force, and it was one of the bases that we supplied because I flew on C-130s at the time. And so when that happened, I thought, wow, this is weird. This is not like Outer Limits. These are military people investigating it. So tell me what you know about that.
All right. Well, it was back in 1980. I was 5, so obviously I didn't know anything about it. But over the years, I studied, and Jim Peniston, who was in the Marines back then, not Marines, sorry, Air Force back then. Jim Peniston was over in the UK, and short story, saw some lights with his group, inspected it, and he decided to look further into it, walked up to this craft. He described it as kind of a time lag, like almost fighting through, like walking in water to try to get to the craft. He said he felt a lot of static. It was a triangle type, small, as big as a 2 times of my kitchen table here. Not very big. It was completely black, like black glass almost. And he walked up to it. And again, this is the short version. There's hieroglyphs on there, some sort of glyphs. He put his hand on it. And in his mind, everything went white. He kept seeing zeros and ones, almost like he was downloaded with binary code. And he didn't know what it was. And basically, after the fact, he reported it. They said the usual, you didn't see that, nothing happened, please don't talk about it, get back to work, because he was afraid of losing his job. He just forgot about it. But he couldn't sleep. He kept writing down zeros and ones in his notebook. And he kept this notebook for 30 years. In 2010, when he met with someone to do an interview, he gave him a notebook with drawings of the hieroglyphs. And the gentleman said, "What are these numbers?" And he said, "I don't know. Check it out." So he brought it to someone who knows binary code and decoded it, and it came up with basically a translation. And it's hard to get into as far as the exact phrases because it'll sound silly coming from me, but it did have some coordinates of some really important places like the pyramids, for example, along with a thing that said basically the study of humanity, and the year was 8100. So in his brain, he just had no clue what happened, wrote down some numbers get translated into English, and it's almost like this was a time travel. So Jim feels that this was humans either time traveling and not really here, but sort of in a time lag where they just appear and he just happened to stumble upon it. So they were here to study us, or an actual craft, which he, was physically here. There was physical evidence in the forest.
Right. I read that
there were other witnesses that said they saw lights. There was an audio recording. So there's a ton of evidence, and he's in his 60s now. He's got 3 kids. He's a nice guy. He's, again, never told any different story. Very believable, and he didn't come out and make $1 million off this. He just said, "Look, this happened to me. I'm reporting it. I was in the Air Force, and this should mean something." And again, it gets kind of sad because people didn't care for a number of years, but now his story became a book, and it's one of the most amazing things I've ever heard.
Well, I read extensively about this incident, and one of the things that I have often thought was we talk about alien visitation, and I almost think that sometimes, in a lot of cases, it's not alien, it's us in the future because of the time travel. And if you study some of the theoretical physics, like I'm fascinated by Einstein's theory of time dilation and how that works. So basically, you have space-time as a fabric, and he said if you drop a bowling ball in the center of it, then time can get warped around that bowling ball, and then you can exit at any different point in the space-time continuum, for lack of a better term. And the other part of that is, I think Star Trek is very interesting because people don't realize it, that Star Trek, the warp drive is based on science. So we can create a warp drive now, but only for a very brief period. But the way that works is, I'll try and think of a way to describe it in sort of layman's terms, is that the Enterprise would be in a bubble, right? And so you have the flow of space-time like a river. Mm-hmm. And so the warp drive would create a bubble around the Enterprise, and then the Enterprise could travel these great distances and, of course, not age and what have you, and then exit the space-time river, if you will, at various points, light year 1 or 2 or 3 or wherever they were away from where they were. And that is the practical way for intergalactic space travel, because obviously we know that if we just travel in space and if we don't achieve light speed, then it'll take us hundreds of years to explore outside the galaxy. And as you approach the speed of light, and I'm trying to remember all of this from physics, but as you approach the speed of light of 186,000 miles per second, time actually slows down. And once you achieve light speed, then that's when the warp bubble is supposedly created. And see, I gave myself a headache just thinking about all those times in physics, but I used to have these long philosophical discussions with my professor, and we would just talk about the possibilities. Like, Einstein was so far ahead in theoretical physics that the things that he was proposing were absolutely discounted by the scientific community as crazy at first. And so my belief is that it's the same thing now with warp travel or with time travel or with intergalactic travel. For us, we can't even begin to entertain the thought that it could be possible because we don't have the scientific knowledge or the baseline in which to sort of justify that could be a real thing. But other civilizations could have mastered that time travel, and they can travel through these portals or wormholes or whatever to go to different galaxies and visit. The question I always think about, and I think that's fascinating, is why come here and be secret? Right? Do they have like a prime directive, like Star Trek is like, we're going to come here and just watch and not do anything? Or do they come here and then they go back to their ship and they're sitting around having coffee saying, those fucking humans, they're going to blow themselves up any minute now, or these people are crazy. We do not want them to be a part of the galactic community because can you imagine the drama?
Yeah.
And I often think that maybe that's exactly why we haven't seen them.
Imagine we're talking about cars and planes, and it's only a blip in our human history in general. So 100 and whatever, 20, 30 years. Imagine a civilization that's been doing major technology stuff for 500, 1,000, 10,000, 1 million years. Imagine us a million years from now. If we can see other planets, and we're in a little solar system, but we're able to see other planets around other suns, and we have the technology to do that. Imagine what they have. So only since the 40s technology has slowly been going up like this. I can't even fathom it, right? I think they come here, and I think they look at us, and they say just that. They say, these people are crazy. They're fighting each other. There's war, nuclear bombs, and they don't want us anywhere out there at all. And they are absolutely protecting us. I think we are special. I'm not a religious person, but I do believe that we are more special than we can understand. And I think that that's why they don't come and say like, hello. They are protecting us. They don't want us to go anywhere. And it's possible that they even created humans a long time ago.
Right. Prometheus. Did you ever see that movie Prometheus?
I sure did. It was dog shit.
It was dog shit. What a waste. But first of all, their skin reminded me of those Vietnamese egg rolls, with the rice paper.
Yes.
And every time I saw them, I was looking for the basil leaf somewhere. So we're believe it or not, an hour has gone by already, and I could probably talk another hour about this, but I want to ask the final parts of this and get your take on it. What happens in your... Well, let me take a step back. First of all, why do you think, if there are alien visitations, why do you think they haven't just come in and said, we're going to, eradicate the human race and take all the natural resources of this planet? And the second question is what do we do if an alien race comes to visit Earth and they are hostile, they're not benevolent?
Well, to answer the first part, I think that we're very lucky that it hasn't happened yet. But because it hasn't happened yet, it probably won't. If aliens are out there and they found our planet, I think we're the 1%. I think we're the warmongering crazy people. I think that most aliens, or whatever we call them, most beings, are not like that. I think they have reached space travel, and they have to probably spend a lot of time together if they are things like us, where they have feelings,
social
or they
norms
can
and things, right?
think. So I think they get here and they just are studying us like we study animals. I think and I think that we're more special than we think we are. I think that this world is unique. I think that there are obviously maybe trillions of planets that could have life, but this planet is different, and everything's so far away. Who's to say that they only found us and nobody else? Maybe they are here and they can't find anyone else. Maybe we're the last ones that they can find. Do you know what the Fermi paradox is?
Yes.
Fermi paradox?
Yes.
So it's, that's a long one. But, maybe that's just what it is. Maybe we're here, they're there, maybe they're not, and they were, or they're going to be. But space and time, we only live, me and you, hopefully till 100 or more. Not a lot of years.
It's not a lot of years in the broad scheme of things. And like I always say that, a lifetime to us is a blip. Not even a blip. It's a micro blip, millimicro blip in history. And but I don't know why, but I just feel like that we're coming to a crescendo of some sort. And I don't know if I'll live to see that, but I know that it's going to happen sooner rather than later. As we start to venture out in the stars, I think we'll get the more attention. It's one thing to be stuck on a planet and they can come and go as they please. It's another thing when we start, venturing out into our own solar system. I think that'll catch their attention. I think that'll be the catalyst for them to be more known. And then the other part that, what happens if an alien race comes here to Earth and they are malevolent? What do we do? What is that like in your mind?
Wow.
Like, War of the Worlds.
First, and I don't want to forget, just ask yourself tonight why we haven't been back to the moon. That'll keep you up all night.
Yep.
Wow.
Have you seen, before you go on, have you seen the interviews with Buzz Aldrin and a few other astronauts? And you're like, what the fuck do they know? Listen, that's a whole other show. Just the going to the moon and what they found and what have you. This is what I'm talking about, Wes. Is that it's easy for a population to be ignorant and clueless about what's happening. As long as we can, we get our paycheck and we go shopping and this and that. We don't care about who's on the moon or what they're doing in outer space. Yeah. I fully believe that two things. Number one is that we already have a presence on the moon. I believe that. And just because there is not a public display of us going back to the moon doesn't mean we haven't been back there. The second thing is, I think that when we went there the first time, we found something. And I believe that is a bigger secret that the government is keeping. Listen, you and I are not going to go to the moon. We're not going to drive by and say, oh, hey, why haven't we heard about that? So there's only precious few people that can actually talk about what's out there. And I believe that as Buzz Aldrin gets closer to his deathbed, I mean, he's already, 90 or whatever, when he gets closer to his deathbed and he just doesn't give a shit anymore, I almost guarantee you he's going to blurt out something that is going to be life-changing.
Let's hope so. We could use it.
And now go on and tell me what happens when an alien race, if there are any, comes to Earth and they're malevolent.
I would say we lose, right? So if anyone comes here and they're bad and they made it all the way here from wherever they are, I think it's automatic lose. There's no way around it. Wouldn't you agree?
I do agree, because if they have the ability to come here, they already have technology far and away more advanced than us. So what are we going to fight about? What can we fight with? Now, I thought the premise of War of the Worlds was interesting, was that all of our guns, rockets, airplanes, tanks, and armament were no match for the aliens, but microorganisms are what eventually did them in, because that's nature's way, or if you could say God's way of saying, I'm going to protect the people on the earth, and the smallest of that is what was the victor. I think that is probably our only defense, is something in nature. It's not going to be technology. It's not going to be anything. It's going to be something in nature. I want to close with this. Have you ever seen the movie A Quiet Place?
No. So I'm not a big scary movie person, but like when Quiet Place 2, the previews kept coming out, I was like, oh, I got to do that. So it's on my list. So
I will tell you, I'm not going to give anything away. It is alien related. It's not horror.
Okay.
It's alien related. And what it talks about is very similar to War of the Worlds. That something that is so innocuous to us is can be used effectively, potentially. I can't say anymore because I'll give it away. But it's very well done. By the way, I think they spoke 50 words in the whole movie.
Oh my God, that's torture.
It is torture, but the acting, Emily Blunt and John Krasinski, were amazing in that movie. And I will tell you this, in the very beginning of the movie, within the first half hour, be prepared.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
It is a really good movie, and it will get you thinking. So, Wes, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show. I probably could have this conversation for another hour. Seriously, I've got so many notes here. I was like, I want to talk about MUFON, and we didn't really cover that too much, but I hope that you'll come back on another show and talk about this more.
You can find all of the episodes of the DJ Doran Show on our website, djdoran.com, or on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Deezer, CastBox, and Podomatic, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Be sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes as they are available, and be sure to follow the DJ Doran Show on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.